Uh, Please let Kristen know if you can't see this. I'm John Kramer. I'm the president of the Hudson River Foundation, and I'm happy to be able to talk to you today about the first round of funding coming from a very, very old order of consent that I suspect many of you have known about with respect to really doing good works on the lower Esopus, this funding from New York's DEP, and really related to a whole lot of management issues upstream. The foundation, by way of just a little bit of history, has been the holder of funds from this consent since 2013. Our relationship with New York State was renewed in 2023, and we've been working closely with Ulster County in a variety of different ways to really move forward on this. And I think just for the sake of sort of administration, our role in this is to not just hold the funds, but because we are a long-term organization, we've been around over 40 years and deeply embedded in our work is allocating funding for a variety of different kinds of things, everything from very, very interesting research projects to community engagement to handling everything from this to other trusts and environmental benefit funds that include construction and all kinds of things. So we've done this for a long time, and I think this is one that as the president of the foundation is very close to my heart because I've wanted to see these funds move for a long time, and so I'm grateful for all of the folks who participated in getting us this far along. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through a little bit about the RFP, and hopefully there's not a lot of us online today, so I'll be able to take questions as we go. And I want to also make sure that you know that there's opportunities to ask questions after this is over through email or other ways of contacting me at the foundation. So we have, from the original order of consent that was started in 2013, $2 million of environmental benefit funds towards the implementation of recommendations projects from the stream management plan. And that plan was a long time in coming. And the stream management plan was completed over the last couple of years. And it focuses on benefit projects in the lower Esopus Creek. And again, all related to impacts from the order of consent or identified in the order of consent. What came after that, of course, the stream implementation plan was the management plan was the Lower Esopus Stream Implementation Plan, which really provides, at this moment at least, the first round of many kinds of projects that were deemed appropriate and having providing an opportunity for impact in terms of environmental benefits. And as I think many of you know, because you probably were involved in some of this work, there's a lot of them. And so we've thought deeply about the role of these particular funds, this $2 million in a set of projects that will surely cost much more than that if they were all to be implemented. So the general program going forward right now is to adjust priority projects from the implementation plan. We want to fund projects to achieve environmental benefits. We want to ultimately make sure that there's coordinated activities with the county and a whole variety of other stakeholders. And we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but recognizing that these funds are limited in many respects and that these projects can be very, very expensive. I think we all, and even at this moment, are thinking ahead to how can you leverage other funding sources to fully complete or, if possible, to even expand these projects. And I think that's an important consideration as you as potential applicants move forward. What I like to say, excuse me, what I like to say is that the best projects engage lots of stakeholders. The best projects are often more expensive than any one funding source. And so being able to link stakeholders and knit together different kinds of funding really expands the possibilities and ultimately expands the likelihood of success over the long term. And I think that's part of our mission at the foundation, and I hope we can make sure that happens here. Um, And I think a longer term goal of this program, this funding program, is to work with you and the county and others to see if there are ways that these initial investments can lead to a sustained program. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So this is the general funding plan. Year one is about a total of spending $600,000. Some of that money will go for a project that's not going to be talked about today, but it's to hire a coordinator that will help with a variety of watersheds, but have spent some time with the lower Esopus. And that we'll talk about that in other venues. But it's going to have, so first year is a total fund spend of 600,000. And we're anticipating $700,000 a year for the next 2 years after that. Um, and in this year, for this particular webinar, and for this particular request for applications and request for letters of interest, we anticipate spending up to $500,000. We may not spend all of that. It depends on what comes in, and then we go through the full proposal process. But that's the target, and not an insignificant amount of money. But we think it's the right place to start as we initiate this and we begin to work with the many providers and the many applicants to really start to think through how we can achieve these environmental benefits. If those of you who have time, have had looked at or been involved in the implementation plan, know that there's a whole variety of different, for lack of a better term, focus areas inside of there. There's many, many projects. And I think for this first year in consultation with stakeholders, in consultation with Department of the Division of Water, that water quality improvements are really the top of the list for now. We really are thinking very to be focused on those for this first year of funding. So this goal of achieving water quality improvements is really important. How we get there with restoration and implementable projects is really key. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We recognize that is interest in planning, but I think we want to say from the outset that projects that are focused on design or capital restoration projects would likely be acceptable, specifically if it's going to lead to water quality focus. But design isn't just plans. Design is really when you're leading toward those steps that will actually make things happen in the environment. So planning is an early stage, design is a later stage, and we will focus more on design. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. So again, achieving water quality improvements, restoration and other implementable projects, things that are ready to go, and design as opposed to planning. I want to also mention at this point that some of the other project areas that have been identified in that implementation plan, things like access projects, invasive species, communications projects as standalones, we're not going to focus on those this year. That does not mean in any way they're not important. What it means is that they will likely and almost certainly be included in subsequent years. So I want to just emphasize that again. There are almost all these projects that are listed are very important. But given the limits in funding, given as we are rolling out this program, it's water quality that we're going to focus on for this first round of funding. So underneath that broad umbrella of water quality, here's some areas that we've identified. And if you have clicked the link in the announcement that went out, you'll see this in the instructions to begin to start putting thought to proposals. These are the things that we think are most important to focus on this first year. Mitigating turbidity and sediment loads, improving stormwater management, reducing nutrient loads of eutrophication, including eutrophication and non-point sources, reducing sediment sources through shoreline and hillside stabilization, management of septic systems and to reduce pathogen and nutrient sources, so the improvement in that area, and understanding and mitigated flood risk and associated episodic inputs and impairments from stormwater. That's a pretty broad list and a pretty inclusive list. And I think based on listening to lots of folks talk and then working with the county and Kristen and others, this is a great place to start. Again, and I'll mention it when we get a little further on, these are not trivial projects in many cases, and we'll have to think very creatively and ask you to think creatively on how to build enough resources to bring together a full package of funding. But we think, again, these are the right priorities for right now. So with that said, I want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for and who we're looking for applications. Um, this is an opportunity for municipalities and 501c3 organizations, and the preference is those with a presence in the region. And so we're thinking very much about those who are knowledgeable, those who have experience, the municipalities who have need, um, and to really think carefully about the right groups who can make these impacts, who have a high likelihood of being able to bring these projects to fruition. A successful application will have to address a priority project in the implementation plan. And again, I'll risk saying this too many times in this brief introduction, that positive impact on water quality. And again, there will be other opportunities in future RFPs. Our intent is to fund projects with a budget in the range of $50,000 to $100,000. And so please keep that in mind as you begin to frame and think about what you'll put in your letter of interest to us. Matching funds are important in this. They really are. And as with a lot of programs, we would like a 20% minimum match to be that would be secured. So think about that. We'll ask you about that in the letter of intent that you'll put in. And if the application is successful, we'll need to know the status of those so to make sure those funds are in place. Um, Again, I'm going to come back to this notion of leveraging, and leveraging isn't exactly match. Leveraging really is thinking about coordinated funding with other programs their funding could be available. And I know Kristen will talk about the CFA later today, but we'd like you to think carefully about, and I say this a lot, is a portfolio approach. What else is out there? Who else could participate? Who else could provide support for this? And how you again might knit different funding sources together as you build a program to really have the impact that I think each of you will envision when you give us your letter of interest and ultimately a full proposal. Here's what we're going to look for when we look at the initial review of what you're going to send us in this first round of this process. Again, a priority identified in the implementation plan. Matching funds are identified, and as far as scoring, more than 20% certainly would be preferred. Expertise in the type of projects proposed. We think this is important, and I think that's not unreasonable. Feasibility is also really something important, given the available funding and timeline. Our hope, and I think we have to think about this as program managers, is that what we fund with these potentially one-time funds really is going to lead to that outcome. So is it feasible? And is the package in place? Is it the right team? Can we anticipate that with funds that may not be available again, that it can be completed in a reasonable time frame? We hope about 2 years for this. So that feasibility is really a critical thing for you all to think about as you begin to frame what you'd like to do. If there's construction involved in any way, can the permits be obtained in the right time frame? I think, you all may live this more than we do as project funders, but we have become very aware that permitting can be quite difficult to think about. And so we ask you to think about that early on as you go forward with this. And again, plans are not necessarily a priority here, but designs may be. And I'll run through some things in a minute with that. So, um, so when you look at the implementation plan, there are a few general areas that jump out immediately. In my early days working on this, I looked at that great long list and reorganized them into buckets. And one of those had water quality on it. Another had stormwater management on it. Another had buffers and stabilization. And I'll go through those briefly in a minute. And so I think I'm going to go on to the next slide now. These are and just sort of quickly run through some of these projects. I'm not going to call each of them out. What I want to do is be very, very clear that we don't have any pre-selected projects. What we have is a criteria. What we have is an opportunity for you as applicants to look at these. In general, these seem to fall into the buckets that we think are most aligned with wanting to improve water quality and have an impact there. But again, there is no preconceived notion on our part. This will be driven by a review process. It'll be driven by this first round into the second round where we'll ask for full proposals. So look carefully at these. Look at the ones that across the implementation plan that fall into these. And I'll go through a couple more of these. So these are the ones that deal with stormwater and water quality that were called out directly. This is a set that deals with buffers and stabilization. Again, just calling them out and again, tracking those. There are another set here that are maybe necessary precursors to building understanding, to developing other initiatives, to studies, etc. Monitoring is on here that may be necessary to ultimately lead to decision making that can improve water quality or other kinds of activities that pertain to that. So think carefully about these as well. So that's the three large lists of projects. Ultimately, I think as you look at the implementation plan, the case you'll have to make is that what you're proposing to do can achieve that environmental benefit that we're asking for now. I think that's a bar to get over, but we will think very carefully about what you write. We'll think very carefully about how you frame make your case to us, and we'll move forward from there. So what are we going to ask you to do? This is not everything that's listed on there. Some of that it's very administrative, and my colleague Zoe Scrival will talk in a few minutes about how to apply. But we're going to ask you to give us an abstract, a brief description of what your project is. We're going to definitely ask you to identify our implementation plan project number. That's going to be tracking for us, so we have to relate it to the implementation plan. We want you, even at this early stage, to give us a brief but compelling case about what you envision the impact to water quality will be if your project is successful. There'll be some questions, a question about how much you're going to request and a justification for what those funds will be used for. Identification of matching funds, and at this stage, what you think are opportunities for leverage funds. Are you applying for other funds? Do you think there's other opportunities? We'll ask you for a resume for the primary leaders of your programs. And then in the case of 501c3 nonprofits, because this work is ultimately going to be linked to municipalities, we'd like you to provide a letter of support from a municipality that understands the work you're doing and sees it as supportive to their goals, and that you can show working in concert with those. Then there's really, it's not a lot, but it is something that you really have to give thought to. We want you to give us a 2-page project description. Again, linked with the title and the implementation plan number. What are you going to do? What are the activities? What will be done? What will be built? What would be implemented? What actions would you take? Tell us why it's feasible. Tell us why this will work and be successful. We can't see into the future entirely, but I think the strong sense of this is why this project is a good project and we can get done is really important for us and the reviewers. What's your expertise? Why is is the right team that can complete the project? Brief highlights, and we'll ask for a resume from the project lead as well. Have you done any similar projects? Is actually a good piece to put in that so we know about your experiences. And this all will be uploaded The resume will be uploaded separately, but the two-page project description will all be uploaded as a PDF into this system. So before I take some questions, again, there's that should be 700 for year two, and then 700 for year three. And then there'll be a variety of other discussions as we move forward. I think one of the important messages I want to leave with you is, and I think we do this with all of our multi-year projects when there will be separate requests for interest and proposals. Um, we will learn from what we learned here. The last thing I'll say is that the letters of interest will come to us. There will be a review process that's in the actual um, instructions that we sent out. There'll be a review that won't take long. We'll provide feedback to all the applicants. And then all or a subset, depending on what we learn from those letters, will be invited to submit a full proposal. And that will be a longer discussion. You'll have more space, you'll have more page limits, you'll have a variety of other pieces to give us, and those will be due in the fall. So the first step really to get this started is tell us what you're interested in. Show us how that what you're interested in can come together. It's not long, but it will be some work. And you have several weeks to a month to do this. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's see if there's any questions for right now before I turn it over to Zoe, who will talk to you about how to apply. I think
There are a few questions.
great.
Would you like, I'll read them out.
That's fantastic. Okay.
So we have one from Mary Frederick. She says, I think most would agree that water quality should be the number one priority. Why are we not limiting grant applications during this phase to only projects that directly improve water quality? Which I think we are.
Yeah, I think we are. I think, thanks for that. First off, thanks for that question. I appreciate it. I think we are. Again, part of this is to cast a wide enough net to attract a number of applicants. The second part is, as we looked at, and others for sure, looked at what was in the implementation plan, there are a number of ways to address water quality. There are a number of kinds of projects in this complex system that could achieve that environmental benefit. And so we'll ask you as a potential applicant to say, which one, again, that's the risk of being repetitive, which of these projects falls within your interest area, and why can you confidently say that your work will yield an increase in water quality?
And then later, Mary said, I withdraw my question. You're thinking the way I am. So sorry, I didn't see that, Mary.
I'm well, happy to answer. I hope I
yeah.
gave a little bit of insight, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Krista Bierenkrant says we are applying to support a water quality monitoring project aligned with a lower Esopus implementation program priority project number 46. We have a question about ELAP certification. Do the samples we collect have to be processed in an ELAP certified lab?
Yeah, thank you. And I know you sent that as an email to me as well, so I thought I'd address it here. I in I think the short answer is I think there are a variety of uses for monitoring, and I think ELAP is the standard that would lead you to regulatory and legal kinds of outcomes if you wanted to pursue those. Um, I think when you make the case, whether you have ELAP or not, you have to really make the case that what you measure and how you measure it, whether it's certified or not, can help in achieving a benefit to water quality. So the short answer is no, we're not going to limit it to ELAP certified, but the bar I think to get over is making sure that if it's not, that there's a direct line from what you're monitoring to or how you're monitoring, what you're monitoring to what you want to achieve and how that will help improve water quality.
Okay, those are all of the questions that we have so far. I did actually I think I made it possible to put anything in the chat if anybody wants to type a message there, but if anybody has any other questions,
Kristen, I think I see one
uh,
in the Q&A. It's from Mary McNamara, which
oh yeah.
will in-kind matches be acceptable, such as local highway departments, etc.
Hi, Mary. How are you today? I think the answer is, and we've talked about this a little bit. I think the preference is for a hard money match. Um, but I think if that's the match that's available, please put it in, and we'll certainly think that through as it comes in the application. But I think, again, I know, that we've gone a little bit with the advisory council and others around this, but I think the preference certainly would be for a hard money match if that can be achieved.
There's another question in the chat from Mike Bombs. Can funding be used to build dikes to contain flooding from the lower Esopus?
I think you'd have to look at the implementation plan and make sure that you can align any of the activities with the projects in the implementation plan. And if you can see a direct alignment there, then I think that would be possible. I think, but you have to really think carefully about how that alignment would work. And again, we'll review these as they come in.
Okay, any other questions at this point? I don't see any other questions. I also just want to note that if anybody wanted to raise their hand, they can do that. And maybe if we have another Q&A at the end after Zoe explains how to apply, then I can also enable people to talk because we don't have a huge, we have about 15 participants. So I think if people had questions and they want to ask them in person, we can allow you to talk. So I'll pass it off to Zoe.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Screwwalla. I'm the Grants and Contract Manager at HRF, and I'm just going to share a little bit about our grants portal, which is where you'll go to apply for a grant. And we have some detailed instructions here that we'll share a copy of later, but just sort of to familiarize you with setting up your account and just the basics so that it's not all new when you go to apply. So the first thing you'll do is if you don't have an account with Proposal Central, which is the grants portal, you'll need to create your account, which is pretty simple. Go to proposalcentral.com, you click your need an account button to navigate to the registration page. And the registration page just asks you for a username, your name, email, and I think maybe a security question. You just have to agree to their terms of service, pretty standard stuff. And then once you create an account, you can go back and log in here on the main page and just make sure you're logging in as an applicant, since sometimes if you try to log in as a funder or reviewer, that might be an issue. So once you log in, you've created your account, you can look for our grant opportunity, which will be on the grant opportunities tab. And you can find that just by searching Hudson River Foundation. And right here, you can see Lower Esopus Stream Management Plan grants will pop up for you to create your, in this case, letter of interest. So to create that letter of interest, you hit apply now and your title page will pop up. You'll just enter project title, and this can be edited later, but you do need a title in order to sort of create your proposal and unlock the other sections. So just enter a title, hit save, and you can move on. And one important thing that I just want to highlight here, like I said, there's a lot of detail in these slides that we'll send later, but one key part of the grants portal is your institution, because that's really how we, validate financial information down the line, submit deliverables, things like that. And we want to make sure that you get that set up as soon as possible. So we recommend, if you're planning to apply, just go ahead and create your account, today if you'd like, just so that way you have everything set up before you go into apply. And so getting into the institution, Once you edit, you go to your professional profile, which you can do from the LOI or you can do it from your homepage. And you'll need to just add a primary institution. So you hit add institution and you can go to the search page. That'll take you to this search page. And either your institution may already be registered within the system. So if that's the case, you can go ahead and just select it to add that institution to your profile. But it might be the case that it's not yet in the system. And that's totally fine. You'll just need to add that institution and it needs to be confirmed. So that'll essentially like someone from Proposal Central will just confirm that this is, the institution is spelled correctly and it's real, it exists, things like of that nature. So that way we can have a bit of a validation system. So if that is the case that you don't see your institution, you can just go back by resetting the filter and request a new institution profile. I know this is a lot of information, but once again, all these slides will be available to you to check, and we're also recording this webinar, so you can come back and go over the instructions if needed. So if you do request a new institution, you'll just enter the required information and hit save. And like I said, so someone from Proposal Central will actually be confirming all the information to make sure it's correct. So, that can take a couple days, which once again is why we recommend that you create the account as soon as possible. And yeah, so once you've done that, you can go back to your LOI and the rest of this information is pretty straightforward. As John went over, we'll ask for your project team members. We'll ask for some abstract information and some basic overview of your project, your budget, just general summary, and then those attachments that John went over. And throughout all of this, I would say just to remind everyone to just save your work along the way. That's important. So if you want to maybe write your answers out in a Word document separately, copy paste those in just to make sure that, everything is saved as you're working on it. That's just one thing to keep in mind. And at the very end, once you've completed all this information, you can go ahead and validate your application. And this basically goes through and checks to confirm that you've submitted all of the information, or sorry, filled out all the fields that are required in order to submit your application. So once you've done that, you can save your PDF application. So this will just compile everything as one document for you. And then you can submit your application. And once that is submitted, we'll go through the review process and get back to you on that for the next phase of the proposal. And one last thing is that if there's any sort of technical issues that you encounter, there is a support line for Proposal Central. And they're quite responsive during the business hours, Monday through Friday, or you can create an email ticket. You can send them an email or submit their support form. So anything that's sort of a technical question about the grants portal, those are some resources for you. And then any program questions, you can contact HRF for that. So I know that was a lot of information. So if anybody has any questions at this point about the grants portal, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand. But yeah, this is just essentially to give you a bit of familiarity since this is a new system that HRF is working with that we're hoping will streamline our grants process. Yeah. Anything to add, John, or does that sound good?
No, that's great, Zoe. And again, I think Zoe is really quite good at this. Proposal Central is quite responsive. And to date, we've been using it for about a year now. To date, it's working pretty well. It's really the first part to get over is really that registration and getting your institution in there. We found that that can be I think registering in an individual is not hard. It's the institution is a little bit cumbersome. And for this part, once you get past that and begin working on the actual application, it's filling in some boxes with character limits. It's uploading a PDF or two, and that's pretty straightforward. We tried to make that certainly at this stage, as straightforward as possible. I did see one other question in the chat from Mary McNamara, and she's referring to our website that has a list of the next steps for the program. And so do you want to stop sharing and I'll just share quickly from my end?
Yeah.
All right, let me, hold on for 1 sec. This is our website, which has some um, dates and deadlines on it. And Mary's referring to right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. It says March 14th, 2025. That's a typo. And we'll fix that. Thank you for calling it out, Mary. Our intent is to announce those that are successful, certainly by the end of the year, if not earlier. And again, there's some alignment now, and Kristen will talk about that later today with other potential funding sources. But we would like to make sure, and as much as possible, we can announce those that will be funded by the end of 2025. Let me stop sharing there, Kristen. And
Okay.
I think we're happy to take any other questions you might have now or later.
Just there was another question from Krista, kind of similar, like when are projects expected to start? So that would be March 2026
I think
or
start date probably would
there.
be around then. Yeah. So that's I think we'd like to be able to announce by the end of the year, have all the packages together. For us, going from a successful proposal to contracting can be pretty quick. It just depends on a variety of things. We're pretty good at contracts these days, and it's on that. In fact, that's all done inside of the Altum system as well. But realistically, probably early spring.
Great. Does anybody have any other questions or would anybody like to be, we have about 20 more minutes in this section of the webinar, and then we're taking an hour break for lunch and starting again at 1 o'clock. So if anybody wants to speak, you could raise your hand or put a note in the chat and I can enable your, let's see, anonymous attendee. Is there help for more assistance when reviewing the LOI, the letter of interest?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Is there help in preparing the LOI or help at the review stage?
The application process.
Certainly we can help with respect to the uploading. And I think, Kristen, you want to answer the sort of preliminary questions about thinking through projects. We can talk about that from the foundation's perspective. And again, I think what I want to emphasize here is, and I'm happy to talk to any applicants who would like to talk about their projects. But this is designed to really scope your interest and scope your initial expertise. So I would offer, I'm happy to talk. Send me an email and we can talk about those what you're thinking. And I can't give you an exact strategy for what will be successful because there'll be others reviewing it. There'll be a panel that reviews these. But we can talk about criteria, and I can at least, give you some insights on what might feel appropriate or not appropriate, and and a little bit about how you might craft your argument.
And I would just say the same thing if anybody wanted to talk about strategy for this, and I'll be talking about the CFAs later, but if you want to go over any of the projects in the stream management plan and talk about how your project may or may not fit with a project that's listed in the management plan, I'd be happy to be open to a phone call or send me an email and to talk with anybody about that. Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions at this time, then I think what I'm going to do is turn off my screen and we'll take an hour break and we'll come back at 1 o'clock for just come right straight to the same webinar. So you can come right back and we'll start again at 1 o'clock. We wanted to give everybody an hour break to absorb what you just learned before we start the next session. So Jonathan, will you be back for
I
that?
will, I
Or,
will. And so we'll
okay,
look forward to seeing everyone on the second part. And thanks for your time today. Please reach out if you have questions.
great. All right, we'll see you all again soon. Oh, realized I didn't have my headset on. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, well, Jonathan can hear me okay. Welcome everybody to the second session of our webinar on funding or potential funding for the Lower Esopus Creek. Um, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A box at the bottom or into the chat. It's fine either way. Right now we just have about 8 attendees. So also towards the end, you can also raise your hand if you want to, and I can enable people to speak if you have very specific questions and we'd like to have more dialogue. So welcome. My name is Kristen Wilson. I'm Deputy Director of Ulster County Planning, and I'm going to share a bit of my knowledge about applying for CFAs and other grants. And before I get into it, I would just love to know a little bit more about the people who are here. So if you would be so kind to put in the chat your name, your municipality, community, or organization, why you're inspired to work on the Lower Esopus Creek, and one project in your community that you're hoping to see funded in on the Lower Esopus. So I hope everybody will put that into the chat while I'm speaking. So again, my name's Kristen Wilson, and I have a long experience in working with grants. Before coming to work for the county about 2 years ago, I worked with RUPCO as the Vice President of Community Development. And before that, I worked for the City of Kingston as the Director of Grants Management for about 6 years, and brought in a lot of funding for many of the City of Kingston projects that you see underway or in construction right now. Prior to that, I worked for Cooperative Extension for 8 years, and I secured quite a few grants for that work. And I currently volunteer as a board member on the Taproot Community Land Trust, which is a new land trust that's just starting in Kingston. And then I have volunteered for several boards in Kingston in the past. So that's a bit of my experience with grants. Today, what I want to share about are I would like to share about the processes involved in securing and managing grants for municipalities and not-for-profit organizations. I know that many of you may already be very good grant managers or supervisors of towns or people who have worked with grants before. So some of this may be elementary to you, but I wanted to present kind of starting with the nuts and bolts of applying for grants and some of the things that I learned along the way that helped me be better at applying for grants. So I'll share some of those processes, and then I'm hoping that everybody will get an understanding of the kind of funding that exists for water-related projects on the Lower Esopus, currently through the CFA, and perhaps gain some insight into the challenges that are unique to municipalities and/or nonprofits when securing and managing grants. So getting started, I long time ago, early in my life, I worked as an outward bound instructor. So this is my metaphor for grant writing that I like to think about. I think about a lot of folks do not find grant writing to be the most fun thing to do on the planet, but I didn't either in the beginning, and I still don't love it. But what I do love is making projects happen. And uh, Getting grants is a way to make things happen in your community. So I like to try and think of it as an adventure. So the first part of your adventure is knowing a little bit about who you are and where you want to go before you set out on your adventure. So essentially, you're looking at you know what? And I'm realizing that I'm not sharing my screen. And I wish that somebody had mentioned that. I'm going to do that now. Oh, goodness. Okay. Um, I am very sorry about that. So let me share my screen, and now everybody will be able to see the PowerPoint that I am using. Okay. So we didn't miss too much, just the introductions. Uh, and I'm hoping that everybody can. Jonathan, can you confirm that you're seeing a screen that says going on your grant adventure right now?
Yeah, I can see
Okay,
it.
excellent. Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so going back to knowing who you are and where you want to go, uh, then you'll be moving into identifying grants. So I think about that if I was planning for an expedition, you'd be looking at the maps, getting to know the terrain before you go out, figuring out the basics of where you want to go and research what's out there for you to do and for you to utilize. And then you move on into applying for grants. So this is when you're making your route. You're telling the story of how you're going to get there, and who do you want to meet along the way, and how much is it going to cost? And then finally, if once you have made your plan for your, I guess we could say your grant expedition, you hopefully will get your grant and you can go on your expedition and travel your route. You'll be making adjustments along the way. I'd say sending letters back home, meaning reports. You'll be sending lots of reports back to your grantor and also to the people in the future who will want to know about your experience, your project, and then also you'll be monitoring your spending as you go along. So that's my little metaphor for a grant adventure. And so getting into project development, long before you research grants, I think it's really important that you know where you want to go. I like to think of this as the proactive stage of developing a project. A lot of times, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again. I see it happen every day. In any organization where I work, where folks are reacting to grant opportunities that come out, and they try to fit a project into a grant opportunity that's available rather than developing the vision of where they want to go first and then applying for the grants that are appropriate for that vision. In the case of the Lower Esopus Creek, we have a Lower Esopus stream management plan, which is essentially our very large concept paper that will guide the kinds of projects that we'll be applying for. So also you want to research and understand the need in your community, which is essentially what we did with the Lower Esopus Stream Management Plan. And that's, exactly what we have here, a planning study that helps guide our mission forward and our vision forward. However, the stream management plan is a great community guide for the whole Lower Esopus corridor. However, if you are looking to develop a project specifically for one of the implementation projects in the plan, you'll still want to do some sort of concept paper or development of your project. So this is a concept paper template that I'm happy to share with participants in the webinar afterwards that I have utilized in the past. And it's really just, it's basically a one-pager that gets you to think a little bit about the project and what you'd like to accomplish, who's going to lead it, what strategy does it meet within your own organizational goals? How much do you think that this is going to cost? Who's going to manage the project if you get the grant? So all of these things are really great to think about before you even start looking at potential grant applications. So identifying grants. Today I'm going to talk about the CFAs towards the end of this presentation. But once you have an idea of exactly what it is that you want to do, you can start looking for grants. And obviously, Jonathan shared about the Hudson River Foundation funding grant for the Lower Esopus. But we also want to find other grants that you can leverage. And, I think I've mentioned it several times with the Lower Esopus Creek Advisory Council that I consider the Hudson River Foundation funding that came from the Order on Consent to be kind of like gold in the sense of, and I'll talk about this more once we get into how to use matching funds. But it's a way to leverage other funding, and it can leverage any other kind of funding, federal, state, foundation funding. So that's a really special thing about this Hudson River Foundation money. So you can look for other grants other than the CFAs. I will talk about the CFAs today. And I have found that the best way to find out about grants is to join professional organizations, governmental organizations, get on newsletters and emails that will send you the grant opportunities right to your inbox. And, I've done many things where I've had grant spreadsheets and all sorts of things, but everything seems to change on an annual basis, and that's just for me, is the best way to keep up with what's available. There are so many grants out there. There's a foundation center online that it could be useful if you're looking for private funding. But you could spend endless amount of hours looking for grants. And I think that if you know what you want to do, somehow the funding finds its way to you. That's sort of my mantra. People, if you know what you want to do and people know what you want to do, they start sending you, hey, did you see this grant? Did you see this opportunity? So that's sort of my philosophy about it. There are 6 types of funding that you can look at. Local government. So sometimes, like for example, the city of Kingston offers CDBG grants on an annual basis. The county offered ARPA funding, and we're still actually offering ARPA funding, which was the American Rescue Plan Act after COVID. So local government may sometimes have opportunities. The state government will be the CFAs that I'll talk about. The federal government, which unfortunately we may see less of that in this in the coming years, but that's typically a source of large amounts of funding. Foundations, private companies. So like, for example, if you're looking to do gardens, community gardens, something like that, like Lowe's has a grant for community gardens. I've gotten health funding from pharmaceutical companies. They have, they may have like an arm of their company that is offering grants for a specific purpose. And then advocacy or professional organizations. So an example of that is the APA, the American Planning Association. I've gotten funding through that before, or through the ARP. So the aging organization, I've gotten funding through that before as well. AARP. And then so just some tips for when you find a grant application that you'd like to apply for. Make sure that you sign into grantor websites way ahead of time. So especially like for New York State or the federal grants, you want to make sure that you get into those grant websites, get your organization signed in and signed up way ahead of time before the grant is due, because you may have some trouble with getting your credentials set up and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that you do that way ahead of time. Read and I usually highlight the application deadline guidelines when I'm reading through it. Highlighting some of the important things I will highlight are the budget requirements, eligible activities, and also eligible applicants. So you can eliminate a lot of wasted time if you find out immediately that a grant isn't for you because you're not an eligible applicant. So those are the things I look for right away, and the match requirements. We have a grant application decision matrix that I have used in the past. I don't have a sample of it right here, but I can share that with attendees of the webinar after the webinar. And it's essentially a matrix that I've used in the past to help make a decision of whether it's worth it to apply for a grant or not. So, asking yourself, like, do we have the capacity to actually implement this grant if we get it? How competitive is this grant? Is it only 10, or will only 10 grants be given out and there's likely to be 400 applicants? So it asks questions like that for you to think about, so that you might decide not to apply for a grant before you spend too much time on it. And then also thinking about, how does your concept paper match with the grant goals? So a lot of times when I get an RFP or a request for proposals, grant application guidelines, I'll just sit right down with my concept paper and go through it right next to those grant guidelines and say, does my project match what the grantor's goals are? And then once I've gotten into applying for a grant, I always start with the budget. And the reason for that is that a lot of times we can tend to have a lot of ideas about what we want to accomplish. We see a number that we can apply for, and we think, oh, we can do this and we can do that, and we, you know, and many times our ideas are much bigger than what can actually be accomplished with the budget that's allowed. So I'll look at my concept paper and I start with the budget. What's the grant amount that's available, and what are the things that I can apply for with you know, for this project? You know, is it staff time? What are the construction costs? You know, really just going through whatever it is that you want to do with your project and assigning numbers to it. A lot of times you may, to do your budget, you may need to reach out to engineers, consultants. You know, so I can think, for example, one time I was creating a budget for a traffic safety campaign, and I reached out to several marketing agencies to find out how much they would charge. So those are the sorts of things that you can do as you're thinking about your budget. If you're with a municipality, well, and sometimes with a not-for-profit as well, you may need an authorization to apply. Many of the CFAs that I will talk about today require an authorization from the municipality to apply. And sometimes that can be something that folks don't think about until they realize that the last town board meeting, when a resolution should have been passed before the grant deadline is, you know, realize that it's already passed. So you want to be paying attention to that, especially if you're applying for New York State grants. You'll be gathering any data that you may need. Oftentimes you will need to collaborate with partners, and many grants, especially planning grants, or other program grants, will require collaboration with partners, and sometimes that may be paid collaboration. So you may need to do a lot of upfront work to determine who your partners are and what they're willing to do for the amount of money that's available in the budget. And then you're telling your story, you're writing your narrative, and you're working on how you can tell your story in a compelling way. You'll likely need letters of support. And I always plan to complete the application at least one day ahead of the submission deadline, especially with the CFAs. They recommend that because you never know what's going to happen with the computer software, or the you know, I've had a computer go down on grant submission day, and that can be really stressful. So I like to try to get it in, or plan to get it in one day ahead of time. I'm just sharing a sample budget. I'm not sure how clear you can see this, but this is a sample budget for a CFA for the Office of Parks and Historic, OPHRP, Office of Parks and Historic Preservation. They have a grant that's available for parks, and this is a sample budget. So and you can see here we had two grants for this. This was for the Dietz Stadium project, which is now finished. This was the budget for the very preliminary grants that we used to leverage lots more of money for Dietz Stadium, which I think ended up being like a $15 million project. But these were some of the initial grants, and so you can see that we have a total project cost, a grant amount, and then a match amount. So this gives you just a little bit of an idea of the spreadsheet behind the scenes. So getting into grant matches, and this is important because we're hoping that the Hudson River Foundation funding will help organizations leverage CFA funding and other grant sources. And match can be confusing. And so there's kind of two ways, and you have to read the sort of the fine print in a grant application to understand match. And so there's some match that it's when the grant requires a local match is 20% of the project cost. So that's pretty straightforward. That's, you know what your project cost is. You just multiply it by 20%, and you have your match amount and your grant amount. Sometimes grantors will require a local match that is 20% of the grant amount. So if they're giving you $800,000, you have to come up with a match of $160,000, and then your total project cost would be $960,000. So you can see that that's, just slightly different. And it can be confusing. So sometimes you have to pay attention. This is not the case. I think in the case of the Hudson River Foundation funding, it's 20% of the total project cost. So it's this, the simpler situation over here. But some of the CFAs have this. So if you do have your total project cost is $1 million, I put in a little formula for how you can sort of work backwards to find out how much you would be applying for and what your match amount would be. So I generally would solve this by playing with numbers in Excel, and depending on what the project cost was. So just wanted to share a little bit about that. And then grant matches. So often grants can match each other, and then sometimes they can't. And that can be confusing as well. So in general, federal grants can't match other federal grants. State grants can't match other state grants. I've had the experience in the past where I've gotten a CFA that I thought was only a state grant, and then I came to find out that there was a little bit of EPA funding or federal funding mixed in with the state grant, and I had another grant source that was federal, and I found out that I couldn't match those two grants. So that can be confusing sometimes. But then if you get into federal grants can be matched by local funds, and state grants can be matched by local funds, and most government sources, federal or state, can be matched by foundation or private company funds. And so you see here that this is where the Hudson River Foundation money is kind of gold, because it can match any federal, state, or any government source. So that's a little bit about grant matches. And then I'm just going to touch on this a little. I'm going to speed through because I do want to get into the CFA resources and also make sure that we have time for questions. With managing grants, you won the grant, and sometimes you have to be careful what you wished for. It's challenging. It's more challenging than actually applying for the grant. And so if you're with a new municipality, the first step you'll need to do is get a resolution passed by your board accepting the grant and authorizing the municipality's executive to execute all of the documents and, essentially execute the program. You'll want to identify a project manager, and we can think about this for both municipality or non-for-profits. You will be executing a contract with the funder. If you're applying for a CFA, your funder will be a state agency. And so you can generally anticipate that executing that contract will take 3 to 6 months. So that can be sometimes frustrating for municipalities or not-for-profits who haven't had experience with the state grants, and so that can be a struggle. The other thing I should mention about most state funding, it's a grant, but it's really a reimbursement contract, and so you will have to you'll have to spend the money before you can receive the money from the state. So for not-for-profit organizations, that can be challenging. And for municipalities, it means that you need to get your finances in order using whatever system that you're using and create an account so that funding can be accessed and can be used before you are reimbursed. And for everywhere that I work on grants, I set up this cradle to grave system for tracking the grant documents. So, it's essentially just starting with your application through all of the approvals you may need for your project, funder contracts, so that's the contract with the state or the foundation, vendors, maybe you may be hiring consultants or contractors to work on your project, the funder reimbursement requests, which all of the invoices and reimbursement requests to the state be located, reporting, closeout documents, and then any correspondence you might have throughout your project. So once you get your contract with the state, you may need to be procuring vendors. And if you work for a municipality, you will have a procurement policy that you will need to follow that usually aligns with New York State procurement policies. It usually means that depending on the amount of funding that you have and what it is that you want to do, that you may need to do a request for proposals for consultants or a bid for contractors to work on your project. You may need to, if it's a small item, you may just need to get 3 quotes. So that can take some time. When you think you're going to be getting your project underway, that definitely can take some time. And then once you begin your program, it's really essential to have a good project manager who can oversee the consultants, contractors, or staff conducting the programming. And I can think of many examples in local municipalities when they did not have somebody identified and a project just languishes and doesn't move forward. With state grants, you generally have about 5 years to complete your project, but it's important to think about who's going to be making this thing happen once the grant is secured. You will likely, especially if you're doing like a construction project on a bridge or a culvert or on the stream, a riparian buffer, any sort of project where you're altering land or doing something that might have an environmental impact, you will likely need to go through seeker and get permits from, especially if it's a state-funded project, you likely need to get permits. And if you're doing a project that will impact the public, you'll likely be doing public outreach and engagement. And then finally, once you have finished your project, or as you're going, not once you finish, but as you're going, you'll be completing funder required reporting, which is quarterly. And then another thing I just want to mention, and I know that this has come up a number of times when asking questions about the Hudson River Foundation funding and what kinds of match can be used. Many state grants allow for in-kind match, and they'll allow for volunteer time, staff time. But I do want to say that I did find that documenting staff and volunteer time on a grant can be a bear. And Sometimes it's actually not. When you're applying for a grant and you're trying to identify all of the match, sometimes we think of that as an easy way to identify and bring match to a project, but sometimes it can be challenging to manage, and it can actually cost you more as an organization to manage the volunteers and just manage their reporting of the time and the things that they did on your grant projects. So I sort of found that over time, I avoided putting a lot of people on grants as match, and really tried to see if we could find cash or other ways to meet the match that was less laborious. However, I do want to mention that there is a tool that we used at the City of Kingston that I really loved, called Clockify. And that's where you could get your volunteers and your staff members to sign up under a specific grant project, and they could just log all of their time there. And that was a helpful way to be able to track volunteer time. And so as you move along through your grant experience, your grant project, you'll be submitting reimbursement requests to the funder for expended funds. Complete your project. There'll be quite a bit of closeout paperwork. We had sort of a joke. Well, we still have that joke here at the county and at the City of Kingston, where we would have like a celebration when we closed out a project, because sometimes the closeout paperwork was, some of the more challenging, just pulling together everything that happened in a project and getting it together in a nice package and getting it from um, consultants or wherever we need to get all the information. Sometimes that could be a bit of a challenge. So we would always have a celebration when we closed out a project. So definitely celebrate, and hopefully celebrate with your community when you have finished a project. So now I'm going to move into the part of the webinar where I talk about the consolidated funding applications, and I'll talk about this year. This is the table of contents from this year's list of consolidated funding applications. It's usually the CFAs are usually announced in May, and then they're due at the end of July. So this year, I think they're due on July 31st, which is it's the last Thursday of July. So I'll move on to the next slide. So what I did as I was developing this presentation, as I went through all of the CFA resources that are available this year, and I like to think about how sometimes when we, for example, with the lower Esopus, I'm going to go back to this other page if I can. With the lower Esopus, we may look through this through these sources in the table of contents, and we see water quality improvement program, and maybe local waterfront revitalization program, and we think, okay, those are the sources that we can apply for our projects in the lower Esopus. But sometimes opportunities are hidden in these other programs. So I encourage anybody from a not-for-profit or a municipality to go through the CFA application manual with a fine-tooth comb, with a highlighter, or they usually offer some sort of webinar. The Regional Economic Development Council offers webinars or in-person meetings about the CFAs, and I would definitely, I went to many of those meetings and got more and more familiar with the resources over the years as I went to those meetings. So I highly recommend going to those and finding out more about each of the sources. So the Regional Council Capital Funds, these are formerly known as like ESD funds, so Empire State Development Funds. And I noticed as I was looking through that there's a tourism category for capital projects to construct. I'm sorry, that shouldn't say New York City. It should say New York State tourism destinations and attractions. And so one thing you should know is that municipalities that apply for this must be pro-housing communities through, they have to have gone through a certification process with New York State Homes and Community Renewal. But there's a $100,000 request minimum. I've forgotten what the maximum was, but it was a lot. I want to say million, perhaps. And there is a quite a large match on these projects. It only funds 20% of the total project cost. So essentially the match is 80%, and 10% of that match needs to be in the form of equity. So it's not a huge grant, but it is something that's available. And when I looked at it, I was thinking about like the Greenway or the water trail on the lower Esopus, and perhaps there could be a collaborative application with several municipalities that are looking to create a water trail or create access to the creek, and building actual trailheads or canoe launch areas, something like that. And that would fit into a vision, the vision for New York State to create more opportunities for tourism. Another REDC funding source are strategic planning and feasibility studies. So this is mostly for economic development. But as I was looking through it, I thought about perhaps some of the waterfront development recommendations in the plan could fit into this grant source. And so it's, this is focused on economic development of uh, uh, sort of downtowns and bringing more economic activity to areas. But we have several, like the village of Saugerties, we have several downtowns or locations on the lower Esopus that perhaps an economic development strategy might actually support our waterfront goals as well. So, and this is similar to the last source in that there is quite a high match. It requires 50% of the total project cost, and 10% of that has to come in the form of equity. The Market New York program has funds for tourism marketing initiatives and special events. So this would be tourism that would align with I Love New York. But I thought, oh well, maybe this would be an opportunity for the Lower Esopus Communications Plan, or the Lower Esopus goal for more public events. And if we could find some way for them to align with I Love New York and bringing more tourism to enjoy our beautiful creek, that it could be a possible funding source. And they prioritize actually outdoor destinations and activities in this funding source. This one is a little bit harder. The Pro Housing Supply Funds Program. You have to be a pro housing community, but this is specifically for essential infrastructure projects that would facilitate new housing development, and they're looking for projects that would support a minimum of 20 housing units. However, this is aligned with smart growth principles, so locating housing and in dense semi-urban or village areas. And I just thought about, we have some septic issues along the lower Esopus, and perhaps it could be a bit of a stretch, but maybe it would align with creating better sewer infrastructure for some of the communities along the lower Esopus. But you'd have to be looking at, a potential project that would support at least 20 housing units. Again, there's another source, CDBG. This is for non-entitlement units of government. So what that means is that the city of Kingston is an entitlement unit of government because of the demographics, and they receive a CDBG allocation every year. And so they're actually not qualified to apply for this funding source. So I have actually never applied for this funding source, but it is available to other municipalities that are not entitlement municipalities. And the goal is really developing housing and a suitable living environment for low to moderate income people. So you probably would need to be looking for pockets of lower to moderate income people who are living along the Esopus. But it can help with public infrastructure for public water source development, sanitary sewage collection and treatment. So again, I was thinking about the septic systems, flood control, stormwater damage, and then public works like sidewalks, streets, parking, and open space. So I was thinking about some of the access goals in the Lower Esopus Stream Management Plan for access to the creek. So this is there's no match for this, but a match could make it more competitive. And then again, CDBG, this is an open round, so it's just a little more it's more CDBG funding, but some of the things I noticed are recreational parks, community planning, imminent threats to water and sewer systems, drainage, flood walls, coverts, all the things that we might be thinking about on the lower Esopus. This funding source I have applied for and managed many times, the Parks and Recreation, Historic Preservation, Environmental Protection Funds, and these are available for parks and recreational facilities. So when I was looking at this, I was thinking about again, I was thinking about the access to the creek, but I also was thinking about, let's see, the Tidewater Center, tributary stabilization at the Esopus Bend Nature Preserve. This could be a possible funding source for projects like that. They have increased the maximum award at $675,000, and they'll fund 50% of the project cost. So, perhaps a Hudson River Foundation funding could help with some of the match that's required. And this is a great funding source. Again, the local waterfront revitalization program, the city of Kingston has actually won this in the past year for the lower for a LWRP on the lower Esopus in the Hannaford area in the downtown area, and so essentially how this program works is that you have to create an LWRP, so which is a local waterfront I want to say revitalization plan, local waterfront revitalization plan. And then once you prepare, so you can get funding to prepare the LWRP. And then once you have an LWRP, then you can apply for capital funds in this program to implement the projects that are in your LWRP. So I think it was Saugerties was looking at a local flood analysis, and I'm not sure if Saugerties so update local waterfront revitalization plan for the village of Saugerties. That is in our stream management plan. So here's here is the funding source for that. And then this source is applicable to many projects, and it's the WQIP program. It's for improving water quality or habitat, promoting flood risk reduction, restoration, enhanced resiliency, and protecting drinking water sources. There are all sorts of projects that you can apply for. And in the CFA, they have a nice table that lists out all of the different kinds of projects that you can apply for. And I think the non-agricultural, non-point source abatement and control could be a potential source for many of the projects in the plan. Maybe some of the riparian buffers, and also land acquisition for source water protection. I'm not sure, but it maybe could potentially be a source of funding for some of the preserving the forest uplands in the lower Esopus. So this is a very important grant for the lower Esopus. The match is 25,000, and really the amounts that you can apply for vary from 100,000 to 2.5 million, depending on what you're applying for. And you can apply for both planning and construction projects. And then again, this is another similar type program, non-agricultural, non-point source planning and MS4 mapping grant. If we had several people or organizations across the lower Esopus collaborate, we could apply for up to $400,000. Or individual municipalities could apply for $50,000 to $75,000. The match is pretty low on this. It's 10%. And so this would be a great opportunity to match with Hudson River Foundation funding. And then I have, this is a presentation that I adapted from another presentation that I gave to the Partners for Climate Action. And so I have a list of just some other grants that I have applied for in the past for different types of projects. And so I just wanted to share, I kept some of these in here, some of the ones that might be relevant to the lower Esopus. So transportation, there are several planning grants out there for yeah, and I thought of the New York State Greenway grant for, we recently had a discussion with some people about the Greenway along the lower Esopus. So perhaps applying for a Greenway planning grant would be a great first step. And then there are some other sources like the New York State DC Climate Smart Communities program, which is part of the CFA. We use that for a bike ped master plan at the City of Kingston. The New York State Department of Health has creating healthy communities grant that we've used for planning transportation in the past. So there's sometimes hidden, you wouldn't think of Department of Health for a transportation grant, but sometimes you can find opportunities like that in places where you don't suspect them to be. And then here's a list of different kinds of grants that I have applied for and utilized for large transportation projects, including rail trails and streets in the City of Kingston and also now at the County of Ulster. Some of the ones I haven't spoken before, the New York State Department of Transportation, Transportation Alternatives Program. We have one of those grants for the Shandaken Rail Trail right now in Ulster County. I've used DC Climate Smart funding. The New York State Environmental Facilities Corporations has a green infrastructure grant, which is actually, I didn't go over it today, but it is not it used to be part of the CFAs and now it's not. But it is due in August. And so you can go on the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation website and find out about that. I think they now call it GRG, like Green Resiliency Grant, but it's for green infrastructure, and that might be an opportunity for lower SOPUS projects as well. And then some others are, I already mentioned parks, parks and recreation grants, and there are also downtown revitalization initiatives that, maybe they would be appropriate to the Village of Saugerties, or the City of Kingston. I have this. This is kind of a relic of the USDOT raise grants. I don't know that that would be applicable to the lower Esopus, and they might not be available through the new administration. So, but those are some ideas of transportation grants. And then waters and sewers, just want to mention that there are a number of programs at the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation that municipalities may want to explore. They have a wastewater engineering planning program, and those grants are not huge. They're in like the $30,000 to $50,000 range, but they can be useful, like perhaps maybe for planning septic systems, which is a project in the lower Esopus. And then there are other programs there. Landscape design, trees, and gardening. There's if you're doing maybe a small project with your not-for-profit and you want to do riparian buffer or maybe a rain garden, something like that, there is funding through the DEC. And also, I have used the Arbor Day Foundation before. There used to be a program at the DC called Climate Adaptive Design. I'm not sure if that's still available, but those are just a few ideas for that area. And then Parks and Recreation, in addition to the OPHRHP grants, I've used AARP grants for parks projects. Like we got an AARP grant to put in a chess table down at the waterfront in Kingston. And then there's some other organizations like Kaboom. I mentioned Home Depot in the past, where you can find more funding, and that might be appropriate for a canoe launching area or some other park area that you want to create along the lower Esopus. And then finally, waterfront development. The Hudson River Estuary Program, I've gotten grants through them before for waterfront development. And the Army Corps of Engineers sometimes has opportunities. I don't know that they will now, but they did actually, we applied for a large amount of funding through them. They often will require that you do a study before you can apply for funding with the Army Corps, but that is also another possibility for waterfronts. So I think I hit it in about an hour. I know that was likely a lot of information, and I'd like to open it up for questions now. And feel free, I know that was a lot of information. I can go back to any of the sources that I talked about, or I can also, if you want to talk about a specific project that you'd like to see happen, I can try and see if I can identify some good sources for that project right here. And I also want to say that I am available if anybody on this webinar or anybody who wants to be putting together a lower SOPUS project, whether it's this year or next, then I can be available on phone or email and or also make some of our grants staff available. here at the county if you're interested in developing a project. So I am going to see what kinds of questions have come in. And if anybody wants to raise their hand, feel free. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see, and then I might have to come back and share. I don't see anybody raising a hand or any questions. I might have put everybody to sleep. The CFAs and grant writing aren't always the most exciting topic.
Well, from the perspective of interested in leveraging, they're super exciting. They really are.
Yes,
You know,
that's true.
this is the playing field, right? So I think they are. It was a great presentation.
Okay, we have one. I'm going to allow Mary to talk. Hi, Mary. I'm wondering she also might. Are you on the phone number too, Mary?
Are you on the phone number? I am, yes.
Okay, I'm going to allow that to talk too.
Okay, I'm gonna allow that. Like your microphone. Star six. Mute. You are unmuted. Kristen,
Yeah.
hi. Kristen, yeah, hi.
Okay, wait. I've got both of you
So-
on here, so I'm going to remove this permission. Okay, try again.
Okay, so
Oh, perfect.
thank you to both of you with a whole lot of information. And I guess my question was maybe more for John and you both for answering how you are considering prioritizing letter of interest proposals for water quality. And I had sort of a short list of how you would go about ranking, whether it's ease of implementation or making a large difference in water quality or something that can be duplicated throughout the Esopus corridor. So just because it's such a wide range of projects and there's such a great need, I just was wondering if between the two of you, if you could give us a little more information about prioritizing criteria, if that question makes sense.
Yeah, Mary, I'll jump in first and then let Kristen follow. I'm looking at your list and I think its impact on water quality would come first. And the rest is, there's a little bit of sort of interplay between some of the other bullets. So impact actually relates a little bit to the area of impact. And I think implementable means has a fair amount to do with budget. And duplicated is I think is important as how developing models for how you go forward. But I think that's in my head at least. This really speaks to the impact you want to have. Is it, how local is it? How feasible is it? So all those things are important, but I think as we talked, this notion of impact to water quality has to be the driver in this. I think that really is key.
And I guess some of the projects are, as you said, non-point source for green infrastructure for stormwater, and so there are issues that exist up and down the creek corridor, and so it's sort of zeroing in on one neighborhood or one particular network of outfalls. So again, I guess because this is a new program, because it's a new opportunity, I know there's several people on the call who maybe have equal questions of how specific do we get or how broad do we get, such as, for instance, the approach to septic systems. So I hear you.
I can't give you that level of specificity yet. I think what you need to do is,
Sure.
because getting to a letter of intent and getting to a viable proposal afterwards really is not, it's a balance of all the things we talked about, the portfolio of funding, what's available, how you match, as I think Kristen did really a terrific job, is really understanding what you want to impact and how you can put together not just a proposal, but start with what you think the budget's going to be and calibrate from there. Calibrate the impact to the support you have or the ability to take different levels of support and match and leverage in different ways. So I can't give you that specificity, Mary. It's going to have to be really,
Right.
I'm 100% confident that those who will apply will be very thoughtful in that, and that will come through in their letters of interest. And those are I think, that my experience so far with the community is that they are thoughtful, and they'll take these things into consideration as they move forward.
Right. Right. Okay, thank you. And yes, there is a lot of specific needs as well as broad. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna see. Yes. All right. Thank you, Mary. Okay, let's see. Kathleen Gray comment, very helpful information I'm digesting. Again, feel free to send me any questions you may have via email. Mary says, can you talk more about the hiring of a coordinator that was mentioned at the beginning of part 1 of this webinar? What will that person do and when will they be in place? So Mary, that person, we are currently we have a resolution that is going before the Ulster County Legislature this month. It needs to go through committees first, but then I anticipate that it will go before the legislature on July 15th to establish a watershed coordinator position in the Department of the Environment. We had thought for quite a while that we would be establishing the position in the Soil and Water Conservation District, but that wasn't going to work out this year. So we are establishing it in the Department of the Environment. And if all goes well with the legislature, which I anticipate it will, I think we'd be advertising the position in August and hopefully get that person on board by the fall. And that person will be dedicated, 50% of their time will be dedicated to the lower Esopus Creek, and then the other 50% of their time will be split between the Rondout and the Wallkill. And essentially this person's goal or role is to help coordinate watershed implementation projects in the watersheds that are in the lower part of the county. So not including the Ashokan Reservoir or the watershed for the Ashokan Reservoir. Really their role will be to help coordinate the watershed organizations that exist for those watersheds. And I think they'll be doing some more coordination for the lower Esopus and the other watersheds because they have somewhat established watershed councils. Well, and we have an established council for the lower Esopus as well. But I think that they'll be participating with that council. And hopefully they will be helping to identify implementation projects and supporting the supporting people to apply and develop partnerships to apply and create more implementation in the lower Esopus. And yeah, I don't know if Jonathan, if you had anything to add. That's also being funded by partially by the Hudson River Foundation. So half of the funding comes from the Hudson River Foundation and half of it comes from the county. All right. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, then I think we'll end the webinar today. And again, I just want to emphasize that if you want to reach out to myself or Jonathan, we are available. I'll send a follow-up email to the attendees, and I think it's not hard to find.